went through the question first. Yeah.
So the first question is, can you introduce yourself and tell us how you became involved in teaching dialects here in Singapore?
Yeah, okay. First of all, thanks for having me. My name is Ben Tan, not to be confused with Ben 10. We are not affiliated.
Yes.
So, from my surname alone, Tan, you should be able to guess with some degree of accuracy what my dialect group is, right? So as it turns out, I'm Hokkien.
Mm-hmm.
But interestingly enough, I didn't actually acquire Hokkien growing up. Instead I acquired Cantonese because I grew up with my grandparents, so they took care of me, and so that's on my maternal side. So it's actually on my paternal line that I'm Hokkien, but since we inherit our surnames and dialect groups patrilineally, so I'm technically Hokkien, even though I'm, I guess, a quarter Cantonese.
I see, I
Yeah.
see. That's
So
interesting.
so actually, so to get to how I got into teaching dialects and stuff, well, I discovered around Sec 2 that I was actually part of I guess, an endangered species because there weren't many dialect speaking young people, um, and now there are even fewer. So I decided I had to do something about it. I had to, start some kind of one stop station for where people could come to share about their love for dialects and so on. And yeah, so I did that, and then I started an Instagram account first, and then I started a YouTube channel, and then the following is kind of humbly sized, but it has been growing. And yeah, so I've been invited to speak on Capital 958on the radio show with as part of this show called 方言不仿古 about young people and dialects and so on. And then I've also participated in the whole year festival with the I think she was nominated as Singaporean of the Year, Lin Wong, yeah, in 2021. So yeah,
I
those are some
see.
of the highlights. Yeah.
I see. That's nice. Oh, then what inspired you to start teaching dialects, and why do you believe it's important to preserve dialects in our society?
Yeah, well, I guess, well, to go back to the thing about being able to tell what your dialect group is just from the surname. The fact that if you're Tan, you're Teochew or Hokkien, if you are Chan, you're Cantonese, if you're Chin, you're Hakka, and so on. Well, I realized that a lot of people at my age didn't actually know that that was a thing, that was possible. A lot of people didn't even know where their names came from. I had this friend who, his Chinese name was romanized from Hokkien, I think, and then he looked at that and he said, I don't know what that is. It's not my name. It's not my Chinese name. I don't know where that comes from. And then I was like, oh no, it was quite shocking. And other sorts of things like Ang Mo Kio. People don't know why it's not called Hong Mao Qiao instead, which it should be if the romanization came from Mandarin. But anyway, so those are some of the things, little things, which made me think I was very lucky to have learned dialects as a child, even if it's just Cantonese. But I really had to share some of this knowledge with others, and I decided the best place to start was Instagram because that's where all the young people are. So, part of what drove that also was in secondary school when I was about 14 years old. The government produced this bunch of dialect shows. Like one of them was called 欢喜就好, 花喜就好, and they had Jack Neo return to play Liang Si Mei and so on, and those were completely in Hokkien and Cantonese and Teochew, and those are supposed to be infotainment shows for the elderly, but I happen to watch them even though I'm not that old. But yeah, so through that I also learned Hokkien. 所以當今我會曉講 Hokkien 話了，特別唔係什麼好啦，講好話嘅一直以來都係好精準嘅。有啲方面嚟講咧，仲精準過香港人嘅講法啊。So that's one of those things, right? Just to translate, I said that my Cantonese is sometimes more accurate than Hong Kong speakers' Cantonese, and that's actually one of the reasons why we need to preserve it because the Singaporean Cantonese captures a lot of vestiges of how Cantonese used to be, which some of those properties even Hong Kong Cantonese doesn't capture, Malaysian Cantonese doesn't capture, and so yeah, that's one of the reasons. Now of course, when people ask these kinds of questions, and I reply with, oh, because it's important to capture these parts of our culture and this part of our heritage and so on, they can always ask the next question, which is, oh, why is it important to preserve culture and heritage? Which, I think if this interrogation keeps going on ad infinitum, you can't really find an answer. And some people seek to get out of this infinite regress by kind of appealing to things outside of the subject itself. And it's the same sort of thing that happens with justifying why literature is important or why the arts are important. They just jump to something outside, like, oh, the arts are important because you learn history, because you learn to empathize and so on. And I think that's kind of a cop-out. And I would say, with regards to dialects, why can't we just say we want to preserve it because it's beautiful, because it's so heartwarming to say that I know the language of my ancestors, and it's such a miracle that I exist, and what a privilege it is to share something with someone who existed before you. So to me, that kind of sentimentalist reasoning is part of my personal reason. But of course, if I were to tell a policymaker what good does dialect bring to us, then of course I have to be more utilitarian. Yeah.
Yes, I think it's a very good perspective as well. Then how do you think the Cantonese can contribute to the cultural heritage and identity of Singapore's Chinese community?
Yeah, I think well, I can give you two reasons. I mean, first of all, the fact is that if you are actually a Cantonese person, so your 籍贯, your dialect group is actually Cantonese, then well, it's simply a shame if you don't know how to speak Cantonese, or you say I'm Cantonese, but all you know is 猪腸粉 and 燒賣 and DLLM, which the expletive which I won't say here. That's kind of like a bastardization of the culture and heritage. And you should be able to say, well, I'm able to understand the nursery rhymes that my grandparents tell me, just as their grandparents told them. And I'm able to, for example, listen to songs with my grandparents. I'm able to listen to Pun Kan Pat Leung and Shanghai Tan and so on, and sing along with them. And that's something incredibly beautiful. Now, of course, I don't want to go down the path of the sort of cultural chauvinist and say, oh, Cantonese is the best, and like Cantonese culture trumps all other cultures, and so on. And because nowadays people don't even make that distinction anymore. Like, nobody will say, oh, I'm Cantonese, I'm different from you Hokkiens and Teochews. They don't even know what their dialect group is. I mean, that's not a good thing, but it also shows that it's not that relevant anymore. And perhaps a better reason would be just, well, it helps you gain a broader understanding of Chinese in general. Not even if you consider your mother tongue to be Mandarin rather than Cantonese or Hokkien or so on. It still broadens your horizons. Like, for example, if you were to say I love Chinese, and the proof of that is I know how to recite 床前明月光, 床前明月光，疑是地上霜，举头望明月，低头思故乡. Okay, fine, that's in Mandarin. But what about in Cantonese? In Cantonese is so much more beautiful. 床前明月光，疑是地上霜，舉頭望明月，低頭思故鄉. And you see that the words like 月, that's the 入聲, or what's called a entering tone or stop consonant, that really brings out that pensive emotion of, oh, the moon, and 思故鄉, 鄉 is a sound that in Mandarin is just 香, but you don't have that feeling of a sigh coming out, that homesickness. And so those are just some simple things that even if you don't care much about Cantonese, it helps inform you about Mandarin and Chinese in general. Yeah.
Nice. Then can you walk us through your teaching approach? Like, how do you make learning Cantonese engaging, especially for younger learners?
Yeah, I would say I try to appeal to the more Gen Z sort of vibes, and the humor that Gen Z has and the humor that the older generation has, that's very different, obviously. Recently I saw a clip on Instagram where it was in Cantonese, and so there's this very special niche of Cantonese and meme, sort of mimetic humor mixed together. And the video was of this young man going up his house, and his mother was telling him, reminding him something in Cantonese, and the guy just turned around and said, oh, and then the older woman was like, 做咩你成日講嘢都咦㗎? And the guy turned around and said, "Huh, mewa?" And then the grandmother all of a sudden started going, ooh ee ah ee ooh ee ah ee ooh ee ah ee ooh ee ah ee. And that was like, everyone knows the ooh ee ah cat meme, and that was insane to me for me to watch that. And so I thought, that really could inform my approach in teaching Cantonese, to appeal to this sort of weird absurdist humor. And I have done that actually. I've made little toy plastic dinosaurs recite Cantonese poetry and recite nursery rhymes, and that has done pretty well. I mean, people are into these sorts of weird things nowadays, so that's how I make it enticing to them. Yeah.
I see. Have there been any like challenges you faced when teaching Cantonese? And how do you address the declining usage of dialects among younger Singaporeans?
Oh yeah, definitely there have been challenges. Of course we can talk about the basic sort of challenges that come with teaching a language, but I think there are broader issues at play here, and there are things like the fact that people think that Cantonese and other dialects are some kind of like lower quality versions of Mandarin, and because it's given the name dialect, so people think that Mandarin is the formal language, but Cantonese is like a kind of fake version, fake Mandarin. And yeah, so I've tried to dispel this myth on my Instagram account and on YouTube as well. And the fact that the reason Mandarin is treated as a standard language is because it was chosen as a standard language, and over the course of Chinese history, it has always been the language that is spoken by the region in which the government is situated. So that ends up becoming the Guanhua, right? And so because the Guan in English is they're actually called Mandarins, which is why the language is called Mandarin. So it is somewhat arbitrary. There's nothing specifically better or worse about Cantonese or Mandarin and so on. And in Singapore, of course, a large part of it has been political, right? I mean, some of the linguists would say the only difference between a language and a dialect is that a language is a dialect with an army and a navy, and so it's just political power that puts it there. Yeah, and in Singapore, the government has a large part to play in that, in the Speak Mandarin campaign of 1979, and in kind of contraposing dialects and Mandarin, so that in order to increase Mandarin, we have to decrease dialects and so on. Yeah, and so I try to dispel the myth that there's any inherent difference or superiority between them. Now, another reason is that some people, or especially some parents, I would say that it's a bad idea to teach children dialects because it would take up space in their brain, and they would have less space for English and Mandarin and so on. And that's actually appealing to this fairly old notion that is, I think, best captured by Sherlock Holmes when he told his partner, Dr. Watson, that I consider a man's brain to be like an attic, and then he would stock in it whatever furniture he chooses. But if he just puts whatever he wants into it, then you have no space for the stuff that actually matters. As it turns out, neuroscience tells us that that's not actually how brains work, and actually I have a brain here. Yeah, and so this is my brain. Well, not my brain, mine is inside here, I hope. And so we know that language is sort of localized in the left hemisphere, right? And even that is kind of a oversimplification. But we know that the human brain doesn't have a fixed capacity. At least we haven't figured out what that is yet. And probably nobody will hit that fixed limit and say, oh no, there's no more space in my brain, I can't put stuff in it, right? So this idea that learning one language takes up memory space or impedes the learning of another language, that's just not true. And now, of course, look, people will be better at certain languages than other languages, like even in multilingual societies like Quebec and Canada, where people speak French and English. Usually their L1 is going to be better than their L2 and so on, but that's just because of practice effects, right? Since our time is limited and we have to, whenever you speak one language more, you get to practice it more, and so you speak the other one less, you practice it less and so on. That's just how stuff works, unfortunately, so you can't be equally good at both. But it's not the case that just because you let a kid listen to Cantonese or Hokkien, suddenly their mind becomes corrupted and they can't get any more new English or Mandarin. That's just not true. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, after hearing from what you said, I think it's I really learned a lot of new things from all this. Then, how has social media influenced the way people learn and engage with Cantonese?
Yes. Yeah. I've mentioned the u e e r. Let me just turn myself back around. Yeah, that's one way. One interesting thing is that it really has become a sort of cool thing. At least I think in Hong Kong, but I mean there are political reasons for it in Hong Kong as well. For young people to say, "Oh, I'm a speaker of Cantonese" and so on. And um, what I would say is that it social media has made it incredibly easy for information to be disseminated, and so you can also insert a lot of multimedia into it. So, for instance, I recently made a video about Hougang and why we pronounce Hougang as Hougang and not Hougang, um, and I was able to insert a lot of snippets of videos of people actually saying it, and so this is one advantage over the traditional methods where you would just use, you just write it out in a book and so on, and that's not really all that informative if you just read words on a page. But if you get to listen to people say it, and if you have someone like me, haha, who actually stitches together all the videos to draw comparisons, then yeah, a lot more can be learned from that, and so it has really opened up this new avenue of sort of multimedia engagement. Yeah.
Mm. Could you share a favorite Cantonese phrase or expression with us and explain its meaning and cultural significance?
Well, I would say that it's probably going to be one from 6喜隐满 or 西时贤文, which my grandmother taught me. And it goes like this: 有意栽花花不發，無心插柳柳成蔭. Which just means when you very intentionally try to plant a plant, it doesn't blossom. But when you carelessly put in a willow into the soil, it grows into a very magnificent tree that provides umbrage and so on. And yeah, that's very interesting. I think it's not specifically Cantonese, but it is a kernel of a sort of Chinese wisdom that has been passed down through the generations. The idea that fate is a bit supernatural, but chance in general and probability doesn't care about what you think, and so you might have great expectations for winning a competition, getting into a good university or whatever, and you might work very hard towards it, but just as a matter of prior probability, perhaps you might fail, and well, you don't need to feel too bad about it because that's just how life works. And on the other hand, sometimes you get very great things coming for you even though you didn't really do much, and it's important not to be too overwhelmed by hubris or be arrogant about it, because well, that just comes by random chance as well. So yeah.
I see. Then what advice would you give to someone who is just starting to learn Cantonese, especially if they have little to no background in dialects?
Well, I would say if you're looking to learn Cantonese formally, then maybe sign up for a class with learndialect.sg, which is this excellent organization which teaches dialects. It's started by this lovely couple who I've met before, and yeah, they're very enthusiastic about teaching it. They offer classes in Hokkien, Teochew, and Cantonese, and yeah, if you're looking for slightly less formal ones, or if you're a student, for example, maybe you can write to Raffles Dialects, my sort of counterpart in Raffles Institution, started by one of my good friends, and yeah, those organizations are out there if you just look for them. I can also recommend that if you want to look for some dictionaries in Cantonese and so on, you can go to Bras Basah, the amazing place full of books, and you can find some Chinese bookstore there that sells these things. Well, if you're looking for even more informal ways to just immerse yourself in the language and acquire it in a more organic way, then maybe consider watching some of our locally produced dialect shows like Hua Hi Tio Ho and Ho Se Bo and what's the other one? Jia Ba Bui. Some of those. I mean those have Hokkien and Teochew, but also Cantonese. And yeah, immersion is very good because, as you know, the way children acquire languages is they just get bombarded by all the stimuli, and then all of a sudden they know how to speak it, which is amazing. If you're older than 7 years old, unfortunately you can't do that. But if you are still in secondary school and thereabouts, there's still a bit of that potential. But even for adults, immersion works wonders. So yeah, get yourself some stimuli. Yes.
Okay. And in your view, what does the future hold for Cantonese in Singapore? How can we ensure its continued relevance and vitality?
Yes. Well, we can tell that it is still somewhat relevant, at least among the populace, and the government actually does perceive its importance because, well, I'll give you an example. I mean, recently in Parliament, we know that uh Tan Si Ling decided to berate Leong Man Wai by citing the Andy Lau movie 講你又唔聽，聽你又唔明, something I can't remember. But anyway, and then interestingly, Leong Man Wai actually responded in Cantonese in a separate interview, saying 咁你要睇你要講咩，要睇你講咩嘢嘅，你講嚟講去三幅屁, and so on. That was entertaining, but it does show that, because obviously when politicians speak in Parliament and so on, we know that that's recorded and it's available for the public, so that not just speaking to whoever else is in that chamber, but speaking to the public as well. And so you can tell that Tan Si Ling is actually trying to appeal to the people by saying, hey, I'm like you, I enjoy Cantonese culture, and I understand all the Cantonese movie references and so on. And I'm not singling out Tan Si Ling, of course all politicians do that, but it's interesting because that means he perceives that the public still values Cantonese as something that makes someone feel grounded and a real local, so to speak. And in fact, that's true. I mean, I know that people actually they want to watch Cantonese films in their original dialogue. So they actually go to Malaysia to watch it, because in Singapore you can't screen the movies with the original Cantonese audio. And so yeah, that's real. People do still want to keep the language around. The only problem, of course, is that young people don't get to speak it, and so gradually it just disappears. Even if the old ones continue speaking, eventually they'll bye-bye, right? So I would say that Taiwan has a very good approach. I mean, for many years they have suppressed non-Mandarin languages and their indigenous languages as well. But in recent decades, they have tried to bring back Hokkien and Teochew and so on, and they actually try to infuse it in a lot of public arenas, like in the MRT announcements and so on. And Singapore actually has been doing that in, like, for example, in some stations like Bishan and Ang Mo Kio, they actually have been playing Hokkien audio and Cantonese audio for their little warning snippets and so on. So I think that's a good direction to go in. But at the end of the day, I think we can't rely on the government to do it. So we need people like me and the people that I've worked with to continue pushing, right? Especially since the young generation, the media that they consume isn't really TV anymore. So, I even if the government decides to unban dialects on TV, it's not going to make much of a difference. What we need is, I suppose, social media stuff and YouTube and Instagram. And yeah, that's what I'm working to do more of.
I see. Oh, thank you so much for your input in this interview. And yeah, really nice to have you here to speak about this topic on dialects as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.